If the Minecraft movie and the Electric State have huge disparities between critic and audience scores because critics can't have fun, 28 Years Later has whatever the opposite of that problem is. It's opened as one of the most polarizing wide releases of the year, with many criticizing the ending, its logic, saying it's betrayal to fans, etc. And it makes sense. 28 Years Later is not only my favorite movie of the year so far, but it is unquestionably one of the most ambitious and exciting franchise follow-ups of all time. And that's not just because it was shot using iPhones or it has big prosthetic dicks in it. I think this is one of the most dense and thematically rich scripts of the year that Alex Garland and Danny Boyle have infused with commentary on Brexit and isolationism, religion, how we raise our young men, the military, how we treat the diseased. This is a movie concerned with our humanity that I think is urgent and relevant and deserves to be considered on a granular level. I've seen it twice now and just have been dying to talk about the details I was able to pick up on a second watch and why I think it all just works so well. So this will have big time spoilers in it. You have been warned. Time codes will be below, of course. And as always, if you liked the movie or didn't like the movie, I want to know why. I'm not also trying to gaslight anyone into thinking this is like a normal movie with a normal ending. There's a lot going on in it, so let's get into it. It's probably best to go through this like act by act because the narrative is pretty linear and our main character Spike follows a pretty standard coming of age narrative arc of getting older and starting to see the cracks in the way his parents and his community have presented the world to him. The first part of the film is when the influence of Brexit for Garland is most clear. This Holy Island community is a conservative, isolationist society who have closed themselves off to the outside world in response to this apocalypse. The outbreak of the rage virus began in 2002, so they have obviously sort of regressed to a more medieval way of living in terms of survival, gender roles, ritual. They train their boys to go out when they're 14 and fight the infected. One of the most powerful reveals to me was how Spike's dad described his first interaction with Ralph Fiennes as Dr. KELSON. They found him collecting the dead and burning them, which to them was immediately strange and unfamiliar, so they ran away and labeled him a psycho and never returned. It took the innocence of a child trying to save his mom to open up that avenue again, and sure enough, he found out that Dr. KELSON isn't like that at all, which we'll talk about, but they operate like fear first. Spike's dad is a fascinating and nuanced character because he's not a cliche, macho, emotionally unavailable asshole. He's very clearly a loving father and seems like a generally good guy, but he has limitations because of the culture he belongs to and how he often turns to violence and avoidance when faced with the unknown and the uncomfortable. When Spike pulls a knife on his dad, we see that he started to learn this language, but he's also at an age where it's not too late to unlearn those things. And this also relates heavily to Spike's mother. The first moment that we see Jodie Comer as Isla is a sudden cut to her acting similarly to how we see the infected act. These little details are so crucial and thoughtful because Spike's mom has a disease that we later learn is cancer that spread to her brain. And I think one of the most important lines of dialogue from Spike's dad is when he says that the infected have no mind, so they have no soul. This not only has something to do with the way that he treats Isla, not necessarily intentionally, but subconsciously sort of dehumanizing her to the point of keeping her in her bedroom and cheating on her, which again is complicated because this is also a result of being in a hard situation because they have closed themselves off to the outside world. But it's something that's clearly internalized by Spike because he starts to have dreams where he sees his mom becoming one of the infected, as I think that he feels she could die soon and is making those associations. Like even the larger idea of death is something that is feared and sort of contorted by the existence of the infected. Spike eventually letting go of his mom with the help of Dr. KELSON is a very tragic moment, but it's also spiritual and beautiful and undoubtedly the most important thing that happens to him in the film. Imagine the difference it makes to a young boy to feel like his mom died in pain because his community was afraid of someone who could help them versus getting closure, knowing she's at peace, and seeing how her life and her death is part of something bigger. Memento mori, memento amoris. Like imagine the anger that is dispelled and avoided because of that emotional validation and catharsis. It's a crazy connection to draw, but this kind of reminded me of the Netflix miniseries Adolescence that came out this year. That show is also very concerned with how young boys are being raised and our notions of masculinity in society. Like it really makes you feel how delicate and impressionable young kids are and how the way they're socialized is actually a little bit high stakes. Or the kids just look the same. But in the bigger picture, the fact that the infected are humans who have a disease is explored through all of these different influences. Spike's home village village is afraid of the infected. They don't have a desire to understand them, and they've almost been mythologized as this threat whose defeat should be celebrated and is a mark of becoming a man and a warrior. Whereas Dr. KELSON actually coexists with the infected the best that he can. He seeks to understand them. He uses non-lethal tactics to deal with Samson, who he has named and says has been in the area for around 3 years. These are all forms of humanization that Spike is seeing that contrasts the way that his upbringing dealt with it, where his dad calls them things with no soul. Dr. KELSON is a deeply compassionate, gentle, egoless man who shows Spike that what you don't understand doesn't need to be feared. This film was very pro-doctor and anti-military, but the way that the military is depicted through this young Swedish soldier, I've actually seen some people say this is like the weakest part of the film, but I like it a lot because it's very in line with Garland's recent interest in how the military preys on young men and how that can impact the rest of their lives. Just like the futility of how he joined the military just to spite his friend, and now he's been completely abandoned by his country on this island. His inclusion also presents these odd anachronisms of contemporary society and slang and lip filler, which sort of serves as comic relief, but it also puts things in perspective and reminds us that there are sort of like different time periods of society and humanity occurring at once on this petri dish of a quarantine. And going back, there's also this notion of like joking around and being playful, which we of course see Dr. KELSON do, but Isla does it with Spike, and she asks him if his dad kind of jokes around with him, and he says no. Something we also often associate with masculinity. It's clear that Isla had a great relationship with her father, and she's a loving, compassionate person herself. I was very moved by the scene where she joins hands with the pregnant infected and kind of helps her through the birth. It's showing that there's still a person in there, but it's also challenging our concept of the infected and the assumptions we might make and how that might translate to how we treat people in our own lives. I wonder if this baby being left on the Holy Island will make that community sort of question their beliefs. There are, of course, so many things that happen in between there that reinforce these themes. I think every single line of dialogue is dripping with meaning and characterization, but those are the broader things that I felt were at play here. Once Spike has learned and experienced all of those things, he enters a new era of independence in the Wild West of the mainland and finally meets Jimmy. I think the ending of this movie is incredible and exciting, but again, I'm not going to pretend it's normal and not a totally jarring way to end a film, especially for the many people apparently who weren't aware that this is going to be a trilogy. But I am surprised that so many disliked it or thought it was out of nowhere, because especially on a second watch, it felt like the entire film was leading us here. It starts with Jimmy in the cold open. We see his experience at the start of the outbreak. His name was part of the landscape through Spike's journey. It was etched into an infected, where Spike's father says it was either a punishment or a warning, which I think is a very clever parallel to the Alpha, who is seemingly the leader of the infected, and how he puts the head of the deer or whatever it is that he killed like up in a tree, seemingly as a warning or a mark of their group. We see Jimmy's name etched next to a biblical quote, "He is coming with the clouds," and Jimmy and Spike's stories both include pop culture and kids media, Jimmy with Teletubbies and Spike with his Power Ranger figure, alongside a violent loss of innocence. Jimmy wearing the cross his father gave him at the beginning, but upside down, is the cherry on top of what seems to be like a Jimmy following cult. And unlike the Holy Islanders who kill for survival, or Dr. KELSON who tries to coexist, these guys are hyper violent for funsies. It is harrowing and scary to see Spike introduced to this group at such a vulnerable and impressionable time, especially because of the ties to Jimmy Savile, which people from the UK have very generously educated us about. The famous British TV personality who, after his death in 2011, was outed as a rapist, child predator, and possible necrophiliac, and they are all dressed exactly like. There's a really dark part of this related to stunted growth and what happens to people who are left with no guidance and community. These Jimmies, who we can assume all went through this traumatic event at a young age, have created a microculture out of what little memory they had of life before the outbreak, and it's taken the form of this weird combination of religion, distorted pop culture, and arrested development. I love this little bit that they gave us here. I think they're setting up so many exciting possibilities to explore those themes and dive more into the religious element of everything. So I'm excited to see what happens between them in the Bone Temple, but I can't lie, I'm a little bit hesitant about Nia DaCosta having directed the Bone Temple after how distinct and meticulous this film was. Alex Garland wrote all 3 films, but the crew is mostly different cinematographer, composer. Many have pointed out also that there's a lot of British shit in here, a lot of stuff that I probably didn't pick up on or mention in this video, but we'll see how it goes with an American directing that movie. It's just a big unknown, so we'll have to wait and see, but not all that long because The Bone Temple is coming out in January. But for now, I'm going to give 28 Years Later 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was more in line with an analysis video than the typical reviews I do, so thank you for bearing with me if you watched the whole video. Again, all of this just really resonated with me, and I didn't talk about a lot of the technical details here, but for the record, I think all of the performances are brilliant. I loved Jodie Comer in this. The editing is such a huge part of the effectiveness here, and I think it's just a monumental technical achievement. Like, my jaw was on the floor watching it, especially in the cold open. Like, the formal techniques used are something to get used to, but it felt like I was just like, I will remember where I was watching this movie for the first time. The way they used those iPhone rigs did not disappoint. So let me know if you guys saw 28 Years already, what you thought of it, if you're excited for The Bone Temple. Don't forget to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.